The wind in the alien market was sharp and cold, cutting through thin clothes like tiny knives. Neon signs flickered above narrow stalls, some in languages humans could not read, others in strange symbols that seemed alive. The ground was wet and sticky from spilled drinks, and the smell of oil mixed with the scent of burning spices. Voices called out from every side, traders shouting, offering food, tools, or strange glowing items that hummed softly. In the middle of this chaos, a woman walked slowly, holding the hand of a small child. Her name was Lyra. Her skin silver and smooth, with faint blue lines that glowed under the market lights. Her eyes were tired yet alert, scanning every stall like a hunter looking for prey. The child's head rested against her side, too weak even to look up. They had been walking for hours, but the child had not eaten for 2 days. Lyra's steps were steady, but inside, fear was rising like cold water. She had nothing left to sell. No coins, no crystals, no tools, not even her last blanket. The only thing she had left was herself. Elias, a human captain, had landed on this station just an hour ago. He walked with a quiet step, eyes hidden under the brim of a worn hat. He had no reason to stop in this sector. But a strange pull had brought him here. His boots crunched on the wet metal floor as he passed stalls selling glowing fruit and weapons made from alien bone. Then he saw her, Lyra, standing before a fat alien trader with scales and a wide mouth. Her hand trembled as she spoke, but her voice was firm. "I will work for you," she said. "I will give myself." In exchange for food for my child, the trader's eyes widened, and a slow smile crawled across his face. He shouted something in his own language, and the noise of the market began to fade. Other traders turned their heads, customers paused, and a wave of whispers ran through the crowd. A mother offering herself was not rare here, but offering herself to save a child. That caught attention. Elias stopped walking. He could have kept going, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care, but something in Lyra's voice made his chest tighten. He saw the child clinging to her leg, eyes hollow, skin pale, too young to understand what was happening. The trader was laughing now, waving his claws, making a show of it. "I will give you 2 weeks of food," the alien said loudly, "and a corner to sleep in. You work until your bones break." Lyra nodded slowly, ready to accept, but before she could speak, another voice cut through the air. "I'll take her," Elias said. The market went silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, some curious, some hostile. Humans were rare in this place, and when they bought something, it was usually for profit or pleasure, never for kindness. The trader's smile faded. "She came to me first," he hissed. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but hard. "I'll pay more than you can offer." He dropped a small pouch on the table. The sound of coins and crystals rang through the air. The trader's eyes glittered, greed stronger than pride, and he waved his hand in agreement. Lyra stood frozen, her mind racing. This was not how such deals worked. Buyers rarely looked at the person they bought, yet Elias met her eyes directly. There was no hunger or cruelty in his gaze, only something she could not name. He crouched down, offering the child a small wrapped bar of food. The child reached out slowly, sniffed it, then began to eat in small, quick bites. Without another word, Elias gestured for Lyra to follow. She hesitated, but the sound of her child eating pulled her forward. The crowd parted as they walked, some shaking their heads, others muttering to them. This was a strange scene, a human paying more than needed for an alien mother, with no sign of wanting to use her. As they left the market, the cold wind followed. The lights of the stalls faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of the docking bay. Lyra kept glancing at him, trying to guess his intentions. Elias said nothing, his boots steady against the metal floor. They reached his ship. A small freighter with worn paint but a clean deck. He opened the hatch and let them inside. Lyra's child curled up on a seat. Still holding the half-eaten bar, Lyra stood by the door. Unsure if she had just traded one danger for another, Elias finally spoke. "You and the kid are safe here." She didn't believe him, not yet, but for the first time in many weeks. The hunger in her chest was joined by something else, a small spark, fragile and strange, hope. The hum of the ship's engines was soft, like a low heartbeat in the metal walls. Lyra sat near the edge of the small cargo bay, her child wrapped in her arms. The warmth from the heater was strange to her. For weeks, she had slept in cold corners of abandoned buildings. Now, she was on a human ship, with a man who had bought her, but had not touched her. Not even spoken much. Elias was in the cockpit, pressing buttons and checking screens. He glanced at the faint reflection of Lyra in the glass, seeing the way. She sat stiff, ready to run if she had to. He could almost feel the wall she had built around herself. In this part of the galaxy, survival meant not trusting anyone. After a while, he walked back toward her, holding a silver packet. He tore it open and handed it to her. Inside was warm bread. The kind that filled the air with a sweet smell. She took it slowly, breaking it into pieces for her child. She didn't eat until the child had swallowed every bite. "You don't eat?" Elias asked, his voice even. "I eat when my child eats." She replied, her words simple, as if it was the most natural thing in the universe. Elias nodded, but said nothing more. He could see she was watching him, waiting for him to make his demand. Finally, Lyra spoke, her tone cautious. "Why did you take me from the market?" Elias leaned against the wall, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Because you were going to sell yourself for 2 weeks of food. That's not a fair deal." She tilted her head, confused. "It is how things work here, not with me," Elias said, and his voice had a final weight to it. The child had fallen asleep in her arms, but Lyra's eyes stayed on Elias. "You will ask for something," she said quietly. "All buyers do." Elias gave a short laugh, but it wasn't cruel. "Maybe I will, but it won't be what you think." Her heart tightened, not knowing if that was a promise or a threat. Hours passed as the ship moved. Through empty space, Lyra finally stood, her silver skin catching the dim light. She walked to the small window and stared out at the endless stars. She spoke without looking at him. "You should know something. Before you decide what to do with me." Elias stayed silent, letting her speak. "My people," she said slowly. "We are not safe anywhere. Not here. Not on my homeworld. Raiders took everything from us." She turned to face him, her eyes darker now. "I was not selling myself for comfort. I was selling myself so my child could live." Her voice trembled on the last word, but she didn't cry. Elias stepped closer, and for a moment she stiffened. But he only reached past her to open a storage cabinet. Pulling out another packet of food, "You don't have to explain yourself to me," he said. "I already know enough." She looked at him sharply. "Enough for what?" "Enough to know you're worth more than what they were offering," he answered. The ship's come screen blinked. Breaking the moment, a distorted voice crackled through. Speaking in a language Lyra recognized instantly, her blood went cold. It was the voice of a bounty hunter, sending an open message to all nearby ships. Reward offered for the capture of a silver-skinned woman traveling with a child, last seen in the station market. Elias caught her expression. "There." "Looking for you?" "Yes," she said, her voice tight. "They always are." He studied her face for a long moment. "Why?" Lyra hesitated, then shook her head. "If I tell you, you will turn me in." Elias didn't answer right away, but his eyes stayed locked on hers, steady and unreadable. She sat back down. Clutching her child, her mind spun. The offer she had made at the market had been simple: her body, her labor, for food. But here, on this ship, The offer felt different, heavier. Maybe she wasn't the one making the offer anymore. Maybe Elias was offering her something she couldn't name. Safety. As the ship glided through the dark, the bounty signal repeated. Echoing like a thread in the walls, Lyra finally spoke, her voice so low he almost didn't hear. "If they catch me, they will take my child first." Elias leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Then they won't catch you." She searched his face, trying to find a lie, but only saw a strange, quiet certainty. For the first time in years, Lyra felt her heartbeat slow. She didn't trust him, not yet. But something inside her whispered that maybe she could. Still, the galaxy was cruel, and trust was dangerous. But in the silence of that cold ship, with her child sleeping safe, she allowed herself one small, dangerous thought: maybe this human was not like the others. The ship drifted through empty space, the stars outside cold and distant. Inside, the air was warm, but the silence between Lyra and Elias felt heavy. Her child slept on a small bunk, breathing slow, tiny hands clutching the last piece of bread. Lyra sat close by, her eyes never leaving him, as if making sure he was still real, still alive. Elias sat in the cockpit, scanning navigation charts. His ship was small, but strong, built for long runs in dangerous space. He had been alone for years, carrying cargo from one system to another. He was used to quiet, but this silence was different. It wasn't empty, it was waiting. After some time, he walked to the galley, opening a storage locker. He pulled out a silver thermos and poured a steaming drink into a small cup. He handed it to Lyra without a word. She hesitated before taking it, sniffing the strange, sweet smell. "It's safe," Elias said. "Humans drink it when they're cold." She sipped slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "You could have left me there," she said quietly. Elias leaned on the wall, his eyes calm. "I could have, but you didn't," she pressed. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I didn't like the way they looked at you, like you were nothing." Her lips tightened. "I am nothing here, not to me," he said simply. Lyra looked away, unsure how to answer. In her world, words like that were dangerous. They made you hope, and hope could kill. She focused on her child instead, brushing her fingers through his hair. Elias noticed the way she guarded him, as if ready to fight the whole galaxy if she had to. Hours passed in a strange peace. The ship's gentle hum was almost soothing. But Lyra's mind kept spinning. Humans were traders, hunters, soldiers, but rarely protectors of strangers. If Elias had bought her, it meant he wanted something, and sooner or later she would find out what that was. That moment came sooner than she expected. Elias was in the storage room, pulling out extra blankets, when he spoke. "You can stay here for now, no payment." Lyra froze. "No payment," she repeated. "You're not cargo," he said. "You're a passenger until we find somewhere safe for you and the kid." She narrowed her eyes. "Safe places don't exist." Elias looked at her for a long moment. "They do, if you know where to look." She wanted to laugh at that, but something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. The kind only someone who had seen too much could have. As they spoke, the comm screen flickered again. Another bounty message. This time, with a fuzzy image, Lyra holding her child in the market. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening on the edge of the table. Elias studied the image, then looked at her. "This is about more than you selling yourself for food, isn't it?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes." But she said nothing more. Elias didn't push, just turned off the comm and went back to checking the navigation route. That unsettled her more than questions would have. Most men would demand answers. But he didn't. It was as if he trusted that the truth would come when it was ready. That night, if you could call it night in deep space, Lyra woke to a strange sound. She rose quietly, leaving her child asleep. and followed the noise. To the engine bay. There she found Elias, repairing a loose panel, sparks lighting his face. "You work while others sleep?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "The ship doesn't rest." "So neither do I." She watched him work, noticing the small scars on his hands. Hands that had fought, worked, survived. It struck her then. Maybe Elias wasn't just a captain. Maybe he was running from something too. But unlike her, he hid it behind a steady calm. When he finished, he noticed she was still standing there. "You're not locked in here," he said. "You can leave whenever you want." The word surprised. Her no buyer had ever given her that choice before. For the first time, she didn't feel like a possession. She felt seen. She didn't thank him, not yet. But when she went back to her bunk, she pulled the blanket tighter around her child and allowed her guard to lower just a little. The galaxy outside was still dangerous. The bounty hunters were still out there. But inside this ship, for now, they were more than a transaction. The ship's lights dimmed to night mode, bathing the small corridors in a soft blue glow. Lyra sat on the floor beside her child's bunk. Her back resting against the wall, the hum of the engines was steady. Almost like a slow lullaby, her child slept peacefully. But Lyra's eyes were open, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Elias was in the cockpit, one hand resting on the control panel. He wasn't steering. The ship was on autopilot. But his mind was far from resting. He kept thinking about the bounty message. About the fear in Lyra's eyes when she saw it. It wasn't the fear of someone caught doing something small. It was the fear of someone who knew that if they were found, the price would be far worse than death, eventually. He left the cockpit and walked toward the small galley. There he found Lyra, still awake. "You don't sleep much," he said quietly. "Sleep makes you slow," she answered without looking. Up, he leaned against the doorway. "Or it keeps you alive so you can run the next day." A faint smile touched her lips, but it was gone in a moment. After a silence, Elias spoke again. "Who are you running from?" Her shoulders stiffened. "Everyone." "That's not an answer," he said, his tone calm, not pushing. She stared at the floor for a long time before speaking. "My world is gone," she said, her voice low. "Raiders came not for land, not for treasure, but for people." Elias stayed quiet, letting her talk. "They burned our cities, took the strong for labor, killed those who fought," she continued. Her hand moved slowly, brushing her child's hair as if to remind herself he was still there. "My mate was killed in the first attack. I saw it happen," she said, and her voice did not shake. "I took my child and ran, from one station to another, never staying." Too long, Elias studied her face. There was no pity in his eyes. She didn't want pity, but there was understanding. "You could have gone to the human colonies," he said. Her head shook. "The humans? They don't take people like me unless I can pay, and I have nothing." "Until the market," he said quietly. "Yes," she answered, and her eyes grew distant. "I had nothing left to sell but myself." She fell silent again, but Elias could see there was more. "What's in the bounty for you?" he asked. "Why pay so much just to catch one mother and child?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because of him," she said, nodding toward her sleeping son. Elias frowned. "The kid?" "Yes," she said. "He is the last of something they want, the last royal blood of my people." Elias straightened. "Royal?" Lyra nodded, her eyes heavy with both pride and pain. "My people had a council, a ruling family, but the raiders destroyed it," she explained. "They took our leaders, killed those who resisted. Only my child survived, because they didn't know who he was." Her voice grew sharp. "If they take him, they will control every survivor left in the colonies. They will use him to rule." Elias took a deep breath, letting the weight of her words settle. "You've been hiding him all this time," he said. "Yes," she answered. "Every day, every hour, moving from place to place until the hunger was too much. Her hand tightened into a fist. I was ready to give up everything. As long as he lived, the hum of the ship seemed louder now, as if the walls had heard her secret. Elias walked to the storage locker, pulling out another blanket and set it beside her. "You won't have to do that again," he said firmly. She looked at him sharply. "You can't promise that." "I can promise I'll try," he said, and there was a quiet steel in his voice. Lyra searched his face for a lie. She had learned to read people quickly. It was the only way to survive. But Elias's eyes were steady. Not shifting, not avoiding hers. It unsettled her more than threats would have. Trust was dangerous. And yet, here was a man who didn't demand anything in return for his help. After a while, Elias turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Why help me?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. He glanced over his shoulder. "Because I've seen what happens when no one does." Then he walked back to the cockpit, leaving her in the soft blue light. Lyra sat there for a long time, listening. To the quiet breathing of her child, she thought of the market, of the cold faces of the traders. Then she thought of the human captain who had stepped in without asking for a price. It didn't make sense, but maybe. Not everything in the galaxy had to make sense. The quiet of space never lasted. Lyra knew that too well. She was in the small galley, heating water for her child's drink, when the ship's alarm gave a single sharp beep. Not a full warning, just enough to tell her something had entered the long-range sensors. Elias was already in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen. Two small dots moved slowly in the far distance, almost hidden among the stars. At first, they looked like random traffic. But Elias's jaw tightened. "They're not moving." "Past us," he said. "They're following." Lyra froze, her hand tightening on the cup. Her voice was low. "Bounty hunters." "Could be," Elias replied. "Could also be pirates. Either way, they're tracking us." He adjusted the ship's heading, making a slow curve to test them. The dots adjusted with him. The child wandered into the cockpit, still rubbing. Sleep from his eyes. Lyra pulled him close, her arm wrapping around his small frame. Her heartbeat felt loud in her ears. "They'll come closer," she said. "They always do." Elias's hands moved over the controls. "Not if I keep them guessing for the next hour." The ship drifted through open space, weaving between old satellite debris and the shadows of abandoned cargo pods. But the dots never left the screen. They didn't rush, didn't attack. Just stayed behind, waiting for the right moment. It was a slow kind of hunt. The kind that made the air in the ship feel tighter with every minute. Lyra sat beside her child, whispering in their own language. Elias kept glancing at her in the reflection of the glass. She was calm on the surface, but he could see the way her hands gripped the edge of the seat. He'd seen that look before. Someone who had already played out every possible ending in their head. Suddenly, the comm system crackled. A voice spoke in the same distorted tone they'd heard before. "Silver skin," it said. "Give us the child, and you go free." Lyra's eyes hardened, and she hissed a word in her own tongue that Elias didn't understand. Elias didn't answer the message, just shut the comm off with a sharp flick. "That was a mistake," Lyra said. "They will not wait now." Elias's mouth curved in a small, dangerous smile. "Good." He switched the ship's power from cruise mode to combat readiness. Lights in the cabin dimmed, and the soft hum of the engines became a deeper growl. "You want to fight them?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "I want them to think they chose the wrong target," he said. The screen lit up again. The dots were closer now, no longer hiding. Their ships were smaller, but faster. Built for capture, Lyra's child buried his face against her chest. She whispered something soothing. Though her own pulse raced, Elias flicked a switch, and the ship's outer lights went dark. They were now a shadow among shadows. He pulled the ship toward a field of floating rock, the remains of a shattered moon. "This is a bad idea," Lyra said. "It's the best one I've got," Elias replied. He guided the ship between jagged stones, some as big as cities, others small as a man's hand. The hunters followed, weaving through the field. Elias glanced at her. "Ever played hide-and-seek?" Lyra gave him a sharp look. "This is not a game. It is if you win," he said. Then, without warning, he cut the main engines. The ship drifted silently. Hidden behind a massive chunk of rock, the hunters' scanners would have to guess their position. For a moment, everything was still. Lyra held her child close, her ears straining for the sound of enemy engines. Then a flash. One of the hunter ships came around the rock. Engines flaring, Elias powered up instantly, spinning the ship and firing a short burst from the rear thrusters. The blast of debris and gas blinded the hunter's sensors, forcing it to veer off. The second ship appeared from above. But Elias had already moved. He slid the freighter into a narrow gap between two rocks, the hull scraping but holding. "You're insane," Lyra muttered. "Probably," he said, grinning as the second hunter overshot and disappeared behind the moon's shadow. After 10 long minutes, the scanner showed empty space again. The hunters were gone, or at least far enough away to lose the trail. Elias leaned back in his seat, letting out a slow breath. "That should buy us some time," he said. Lyra didn't answer right away. Her child had fallen asleep against her again, and she stroked his hair absently. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to do that. You could have let them take me." Taken the reward, Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. "That's not how I do things," he said simply. She studied him for a long moment. There were still questions she didn't ask, still secrets between them. But one thing was becoming clear. This human was dangerous, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he might actually care. And caring in a galaxy like this could be the most dangerous thing of all. The ship's interior was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet as before. It was the kind of silence that came after danger, a silence filled with questions that no one wanted to ask. Elias sat in the cockpit, watching the stars slide past the glass. His hands rested on the controls, but his mind was somewhere far away. Behind him, Lyra sat with her child curled in her lap. She had not moved much since they escaped the hunters. Her eyes stayed on Elias's back, as if searching for an answer there. She did not understand him, and that unsettled her more than the bounty hunters ever could. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "You could have given me to them. You could have walked away free." Elias didn't turn around. "I could have." Her eyes narrowed. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I'm not like them," he said simply. Lyra leaned back, a hand moving slowly through her child's hair. In her life, she had met many who claimed to be different. Most had turned out to be liars. She was not ready to believe Elias was any better. The ship scanner beeped again. But this time, it was not danger. It was a signal from a nearby station. Elias checked the data. "Supply station ahead," he said. "We need fuel, and maybe a few parts." Lyra tensed. Immediately, "It's dangerous to stop." "It's more dangerous to run out of fuel in deep space," he replied. They landed on the small station, a floating ring of metal and glass. Its lights were dim, and the docking bay was almost empty. Elias powered down the ship, then turned to her. "Stay inside, lock the hatch, I'll be quick." But Lyra stood. "I'm coming with you." "It's safer here," he said. "It's safer where I can see you," she replied firmly. They stepped onto the station's cold floor. The air smelled faintly of oil and old smoke. A few workers glanced their way, their eyes lingering a little too long on Lyra's silver skin. Elias walked beside her, his hand resting near the holster on his belt. They reached a small supply shop. Elias began speaking with the shopkeeper, while Lyra stayed near the entrance, watching the shadows. Her instincts were screaming. Something felt wrong. And then she saw it in the far corner of the bay. Two men speaking quietly into combs, their eyes fixed on her. She moved closer to Elias. Her voice tight. "They're here." He followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "They must have tracked us," he said. The shopkeeper stepped back nervously as Elias grabbed the parts he needed and dropped payment on the counter. "Go," Elias said sharply. Guiding Lyra toward the exit, they walked fast. But the footsteps behind them were faster by the time they reached the docking bay. Three figures stepped out from behind a cargo stack. One of them spoke. "We don't want trouble, just the child." Lyra's arms tightened around her. "Son," her voice trembling but firm, "you will never have him." Elias stepped in front of her, his body blocking their path. "You want the kid, you go through me," he said. The leader of the hunters laughed. "We could sell you too." "Human, you're worth something on certain worlds, not as much as you think," Elias replied. The hunters moved closer, weapons in hand. Elias's fingers twitched toward his own, but he didn't draw. He was calculating 3 of them, one of him. And Lyra, behind him holding the child, he could fight. But there was no guarantee they'd all make it back to the ship alive. One of the hunters spoke again. "You? Hand over the child now." "We let you go? That's the smart choice." Elias glanced over his shoulder at Lyra. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw something that was not fear, but resolve. She was ready to fight beside him. No matter the cost, it would have been easier. To take the deal, he could walk away free, with fuel and supplies. He could forget this woman and her child. And the bounty hunters would never follow him again. But that was not the choice he made. Elias took a step forward, his voice low, but steady. "I'm not here to make the smart choice. I'm here to make the right one." In one motion, he reached for his weapon and fired at the lights above. Plunging the bay into sudden darkness, the hunters shouted, blinded, and Elias grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the ship. They ran, the sound of boots pounding. The metal floor behind them, the ship's hatch opened just as they reached it, and Elias pushed Lyra inside before following. The engines roared to life. The ship lifting from the docking bay as blaster fire streaked past the hull. When they were finally clear of the station, Elias turned to her. "You and the kid are not going anywhere without me," he said. Lyra stared at him, still breathing. Hard, for the first time, she didn't argue, because in that moment, she understood he had chosen them over his own safety, and that choice had changed everything. The stars drifted past the cockpit, glass-like slow-moving rivers of light. The hum of the engines was steady, the kind of steady that told you the ship was finally far from danger. Lyra sat in the galley, her child asleep with his head on her lap. She had not spoken much since they left the station, but her eyes had followed Elias every time he moved. Elias was in the cockpit, scanning the long-range sensors again. No hunters, no pirates, no strange signals for the first time in days. The space around them felt empty, truly empty. He let out a slow breath, the kind you don't know you're holding until it escapes. When he returned to the galley, Lyra looked up at him. "You didn't have to do what you did," she said. Quietly, Elias pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Yeah, I did," he replied. Her brows drew together. "Why?" "Because I don't leave people behind," he said simply. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra brushed a loose strand of hair from her child's face. Her mind replayed the moment in the docking bay. The hunters closing in, Elias stepping in front of her without hesitation. It wasn't a calculated move. It wasn't about gain. It was a choice, and it was for her. "You've risked everything for us," she said finally. "You could have lost your ship, your life." Elias gave a small shrug. "Ships can be replaced. People can't." His words landed heavier than he intended. Lyra looked down at her child, her lips pressed into a thin line. It had been so long since anyone spoke of her or her son as people worth saving. The ship's autopilot kept them on course toward a small, unmarked system. Lyra glanced at the star map and frowned. "Where are we going?" Elias leaned back in his chair. "Somewhere off the main lanes, a colony that doesn't ask questions." Her eyes widened slightly. "It's safe?" "As safe as it gets," he said. "They'll take you in, give you a place you can start over." She was silent for a long time. Finally, she asked, "And you?" "I'll head out again. I've got my own path," he said. Something in her chest tightened at the thought. She told herself it was better this way, safer for him. Safer for her, safer for the child. But the truth was, the idea of him. Leaving felt wrong. Hours later, the ship slipped into orbit over a green and gold planet. It wasn't like the grand worlds she'd seen in her youth. It was smaller, quieter, fields stretched across the surface, dotted with clusters of homes. It looked peaceful. Elias landed near a settlement where people moved slowly, their faces open and curious. He powered down the ship and stood. "This is it," he said. Lyra gathered her child, the boy still sleepy but awake enough to cling to her hand. They walked to the hatch and Elias opened it, letting warm air rush inside. Outside, a small group of colonists approached. A woman with kind eyes stepped forward, greeting Elias before turning to Lyra. Elias introduced her simply. "She needs a place, and so does her son." The woman nodded without hesitation. "You'll be safe here." Lyra looked at Elias, her throat tight. "You're just leaving?" She asked. He gave a faint smile. "You don't need me here, and I don't belong here." She shook her head. "You're wrong. You belong wherever you choose." For a moment, it seemed like he might stay. But then he glanced at the sky, the stars hidden in daylight. "This isn't the end for me. It's just the end of this part," he said. He turned to go, but her voice stopped him. "Elias," she said softly, "I won't forget." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, she let him see the truth in her eyes. The gratitude, the trust, and something deeper. He nodded once, then stepped back into the ship. The engines roared to life, and the freighter lifted slowly into the air. Lyra stood with her child, watching as the ship rose higher, until it was only a shadow against the sunlit sky. The boy tugged on her sleeve. "Will we see him again?" He asked. Lyra's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "In this galaxy," she said, "paths have a way of crossing twice," and as the wind rustled the fields around her, Lyra realized something she had not felt in years. For the first time, she believed her path and her son's might actually lead somewhere better. The human who could have bought her, owned her, sold her, had instead given her something far more valuable: a second chance.